Hey family, I'm talking with Rodney Sampson today. Rodney Sampson is a dear friend of mine and has been for many years, and I'm going to be sharing some conversation with him that I know you've been wanting to get right into where you are. Listen, let me tell you what LinkedIn says about him. It says that Rodney is an accomplished technology entrepreneur, inclusive ecosystem builder, venture fund investor, selective advisor, and published author. Along with all of that, Rodney happens to be a humanitarian and someone I call a dear, dear friend. I want you to listen as he takes us through some pretty conceptualized thought patterns and then lays it out in a very real way for us about why it matters and how it can matter. So join me as I welcome my dear friend, Rodney Sampson.
Joining us right now is one of America's most successful female entrepreneurs.
Special guest speaker today, the first African-American woman
to own a billion-dollar company. Her name is
Janice Bryant Howroyd. She's the founder and CEO of
Act One is one of the largest staffing companies in the United States.
She's now ranked by Forbes as second wealthiest self-made African-American woman in America, behind only Ms. Oprah Winfrey.
She spent almost 40 years helping others find work.
Janice, great to have you on the show.
Wonderful to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Janice, welcome to the program.
Janice, what about your
So, Rodney, it is really exciting, as I've said, to be able to talk with you today. Even in the middle of COVID, you've just been so busy. Why don't you just let the audience know right now some of the stuff you're engaged in and why I'm so excited to talk with you today, because you know you're doing some stuff we got to dig in on.
Well, absolutely. Well, Janice, it is definitely a pleasure to be here. And you're absolutely right. Finding that solace, finding that moment, finding that epiphany in the middle of a pandemic, right? Some people would just lean all the way in on their fear and kind of follow through. And I know everyone manages that at different levels and the best that they can. But it is definitely a joy when you can find those moments inside of this moment in history. You talk about COVID-19, coronavirus landed. It was like the first spaceship that landed and shut down the world. For us in March, as you know, we were preparing for our 5th annual OHUB and HBCU at South by Southwest.
Oh, I was so excited about that. Look, Rodney, I got something right here. And I meant to ask you about it because, it was like blowing up big for us, what we were planning to do there, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. We were bringing 500 college students this year. About half of them were technical and computer science. The other ones were marketing, business, sales, and finance. And we had about 50 tech companies that were coming to Austin, Texas, that were going to interact with these students all weekend to give them internships. And so when I remember that Friday was the week before, and the city of Austin said they were canceling all festivals. South by Southwest followed suit. We saw it building, we saw it coming, so we had already started to prepare some. But I remember on that Friday,
we were really unhappy when we got the message from you that our interns and those sponsorships we were giving were not going to happen in that way. But wow, did you guys talk about, it's not even a case of making lemonade out of lemons. You guys were just so prepared for every eventuality. You didn't skip a beat.
Well, a part of that is because we have been putting in infrastructure and working with our team. We weren't per se being pandemic ready or COVID-19 ready, but we were operating in this thing we call the future of work, which I know we're going to get to in a second. But we've been building, my wife and I have been building this team to operate remotely and to operate in that future where we leverage the technology tools like the ones that we're using now.
Is that beautiful Shantaria? Is she quarantined with you right now?
You know what? We've been quarantined together for almost 2 months. And so we're not complaining about it right now.
Well, one thing that I think does help, and this is a conversation about success.
Sure.
People depend on us to talk about success here at Ask JBH. I have to tell you, looking at you and Shantaria together as you travel the country and the world, as you work with students, professors, company execs, NGOs, you guys are such a beautiful team. I'm sure she's a part of that formula of success for you.
Absolutely. She's the one that brought the formula, you know, to the mix. So,
but we were talking about being ready, not necessarily pandemic ready or
right.
COVID-19 ready, but just ready, because that's what we do from where we come.
Absolutely. You called her name and you distracted me, you know, you just, but absolutely. So, well, let me take an extra step back. And I think this provides some context. So, you know, a lot of people know you from where they meet you and based upon what, you know, they're doing with you. But if I go back 20 years ago, you know, before everyone was talking about the Black tech ecosystem and the Black startup and all this venture capital, there were only a few of us in the country that had ever raised that type of capital. And our company happened to be, get this, an internet streaming company. So streaming has been around for 20 years. We streamed all the major churches in America. We had a European footprint, and that company was eventually acquired. And it was funny when COVID-19 started to really get traction on the news and people were talking about it. I had bishops of organizations and pastors, different people saying, you told us this 20 years ago, that there would be a use case, right? A use case for us not being able to go into our churches and hold services, and that your technology would be a solution for that. And so the lesson in that is, as you obtain success, sometimes success anesthetizes the purpose in you to want more. And success, you know, can also, we can become, what's the word I want to use? Complacent in our success, because what's working has been working. And so as I talk to the successful people that are tuning in and absorbing this content, this energy, this knowledge, remain open to what's next. And what's coming down, you know, the pipe. Because as this future of work, as this pandemic hit, and I'll tell you what, we I don't even like to use the word pivot, because we were already on this road. It's more like we accelerated, right? Versus pivoting. But when the pandemic hit, it accelerated conversations in every industry on the planet at the highest levels of these supply chains on how can we operate our businesses if we can't have the density of human beings coming together in close proximity on a daily basis. What does my industry, whether it's agriculture, energy, health, of course, staffing, every industry,
even the sports industry.
Oh, they were one of the.
What do we do?
They were one of the first to shut when the professional league shut down. Folks were like, "Oh, it's over now."
That's when they got the message. That's when they got the message.
They got it. Yeah, and so, you know, when automation, and what I mean by automation, when these human beings sit down and work with these supercomputers and get the computers thinking and creating algorithms. And that's a whole nother rabbit hole within itself. But it's what we call the edge technologies, like artificial intelligence, machine learning, virtual reality, augmented reality, quantum computing, blockchain, robotics. When you take
and Rodney, it's a conversation that isn't just a conversation with these corporate and enterprise folks who are looking at how they do business today for tomorrow. It's now a conversation just like COVID that everybody's having at the same time. I mean, you've got companies who are telling people now, you don't need anything more than a high school degree, and we can skill you into really well-paying jobs, and you can do these jobs from home. And, you know, these are things that you were saying to me years ago when we met, and that you were promoting as a pathway for attaining success and wealth, being a part of that success, not just to work in those jobs, but to own some of the platforms and some of the technologies that those jobs are driven. Look, you know what? I know I'm the church preaching to the choir here, but Rodney, you've been saying this stuff for so long. More importantly, you've been doing this. And I think that's why you were so ready.
You know, well, I think there's a good book that tells you to always, you know, be ready in season, out season. Then it says, do business until I come. And, you know, whether that's coming through a pandemic or coming through a reset of the planet, whatever it is, we got to still do business. And for that individual, unlike ever before, as like this planetary reset, you know, we're seeing Ivy League schools say you don't need the GRE to get into their programs, or the SAT. I mean, in Georgia, I don't know who had this great idea. They're giving out driver's license without a test. If your parents sign a letter, right? I heard it was some kid building an app that would auto-generate a letter for you. But my point is, see this as an opportunity, but it's going to require you to rethink some things, to be open to new information, even if it sounds strange, out of this world. A lot of this technology is, you know, been developed out of this world. When you look at the Tesla technology and how they would go, Lonnie Johnson in Atlanta would tell us that when they go on these space missions, they test new softwares and things and products in space, and then they bring them back to Earth and create products like Nerf. Nerf was created in space, and then they brought it back down and created Nerf, the Nerf gun, made hundreds of millions, right? So the point is, there's an opportunity to actually relearn, reskill, and the reality of it, Janice, is if people don't want to do it, their ability to get work is going to depend on that they do it. It's going
not to just get work, enjoy work.
Yes.
We can't just look at how we knew work. We have to also look at how we renew work. And be renewed by it. You know, there's something that I want to really key in on with you, Rodney. So all the stuff you've been talking about along tech for years and working in, I got to stop saying talking about, because you haven't just been talking about it, you've been being about it. And that's why your readiness is here. Let me say that again. That's why your readiness is here.
Appreciate
what you've been doing along tech and encouraging us to be so ready and cognizant of. I think Mother Earth has been doing a job telling us that as well.
Right.
Nobody was listening out loud to you. I shouldn't say nobody, but a lot of folks weren't listening out loud to you before, who are now clamoring to your door for assistance, advice, and asking you to pull out your guru-ness. And I think the same thing's been happening with the earth, where the earth's kind of been talking back to us. How do those two things happen for you? Because I see a lot of calm in you. You get really excited about the ideas, but you're stealth and calm about the execution. Where's that coming from?
Well, I believe balance is the key to all things. And there's a balance between, you know, our physiology and our spirituality. And I think it's the spirituality that we work towards being anxious for nothing. It's something we have to work at, right? And we have to confess that we're not anxious, and we have to develop that calm. The other thing is, when you've had pain, when you've been through storms, when you go through, you know, the key word is going through it, then you become resolute in that storm. And so while a lot of people may have been panicking, we operate in our household that all things work together. And so as things work together, we know that they're going to work together for our good. Now,
Now,
Good
that
may
comes
not.
out of the good book too. All things work for the good.
There you go.
And Rodney, let's
Yeah.
educate our listeners, especially our young listeners. Don't just go through COVID, grow through COVID.
Absolutely.
Let's say it again. Let's just go through COVID. Let's grow through it. That's what you've been doing through a lot of different circumstances and several economies. You've been doing that. So the stuff you're talking about is real. It's not idealistic.
Well, that's true, and I think, I don't know if someone would say a futurist or economist or what have you, but the ability to develop a mindset that allows you to like peer into the future and work your way backwards, I believe goes into like our DNA.
Well, you are a futurist. You may be a lay futurist, but you are a futurist. Let's just get that straight. And listen, for all my listeners, Rodney is sought by people from all levels of life, all industries, and across so many communities for his ability to not just see into the future, but to plan for it from where we are. A lot of people can tell you what's about to happen, and we can respect that. Rodney enables you through real life instances that are connected to who you are and where you are to build for the kind of future you want. So he didn't just tell you what's going to happen. He teaches you how you can prepare yourself to create what you want to happen for you within that. How about that, Rodney? Did I tell the truth on that?
You did tell the truth. One of my books is on Amazon called Your Manifest Destiny, 7.5 words to transform your future. There's a chapter in that work that talks about going back to the future. And so
that's what I was talking about.
Going back to the future. And I connected back, spiritually. For those of you who are listening, I'm, unapologetically a Christ, follower and believer. And so in my belief, we believe we're created in the image of God. I say God, you may say divine, the universe. And inside of me is everything that was required for me to fulfill my purpose. Because if you look at a creator that puts systems in place, and it means like the universe doesn't have to be told every day what to do. It does what it was created to do. This planet does every day what it's supposed to do. We don't have to like kick spin it and get it on its axis and keep it in this orbit. It does that. And all of the resources required for this planet to sustain itself, even though we create these false social economic scarcity around the Earth's resources, there's no scarcity of resources on the planet. Same thing is true with you and I as human beings. We have that divine spark inside of us. And so when people ask like, well, why are you calm and how do you see into the future? And how do you do? When you unlock that, which is in every single person, you unlock that divine inside of you, you understand there are three things. There's omnipotent, that means power. You have the power to make the decisions and the choices that navigate your respective life and purpose. The next thing is knowledge, right? Omniscience. You have the ability, we all have the ability to gather all types of knowledge from all types of subjects and things to put in our hours to be these subject matter experts. And then there's omniscience. This is the one that people may struggle with, is the concept of being in all times at the same time, or being able to peer. You think about entrepreneurs like Bill Gates. They stepped into history, created something that transformed past, present, and future, right? When they stepped on, they eradicated old tech. They brought us to the present, and now they got us in the cloud, right? I could say that for Amazon, but I could also say that for the Act One group. You all step on the scene, you disrupt an industry, and you do something that's never been done before, and it's not duplicable. And I think when you tap into those,
with our talent communities, yes.
Exactly. If you tap into that personal power, you can do the same thing. And I don't mean to spook people, but if you want to know how we do it, I'm giving you,
right.
Giving it to you. Now, to bring that full circle, you know, there's so much data that's out there from, like, you know, the organizations I'm affiliated with, the Brookings Institution, the Federal Reserve Bank, that they put out this macroeconomic data. And one thing that was never clear to me in the data that wasn't explained was this drop in income and wealth by 2053 for the majority of America. And I kept, for the life of me, trying to figure out, you know, like, I'm getting this data. And then I started connecting the dots in my research to what we call the future of work, or the fourth industrial revolution, right? And there have been 4 revolutions. You can do your research. We came through the first industrial age, and the second, the third. We're now entering into the fourth, where it's sort of like this forced revolution, because robots, machines, and software are able to do things that social distancing, you know, doesn't impact, right? I could put 1,000 robots in a, you know, and I'm not going to say a brand, but in a warehouse, and work there. And so while, you know, Macy's furloughs 130,000 people, Neiman Marcus files for Chapter, 11. All of these trusted retail brands that a lot of people super consume in, sometimes for their own demise of their wealth, are literally gone right now. And they may not come back, or probably will not come back. And so when you have all these hundreds of thousands of
my
jobs,
God, one of my favorite T-shirt brands, J. Crew, has filed, you know?
Yeah.
When you're talking, and hold that thought and incorporate this in it, because you're talking within it, Rodney, because you're talking about how robotics and AI can impact what used to be a people-full environment, workforce. Now,
right.
that's my area, right? Oh, I forget how long ago it was, but it was more than a few years ago, likely 5 years ago. I'd gone to Sweden, and I attended a tech conference there. And one of the things they shared with us was poll they did. And the poll came back that some men in Europe, they polled men, and they asked, would you rather have a real live woman in your life right now as your life partner, or a fully evolved robot to the point they were? They showed the robot, they talked with the robot. It was kind of Westworldish, right?
Okay.
And they had, to me, it was surprising. And now I think back, why would it have been surprising? Not that I support it, but they had over 80% of their respondents prefer the robot to the real bio-born woman. So incorporate that in where you're going, please.
Yeah, well, that to me is very, 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 very far down the rabbit hole that I think I like the sentient being, you know.
Yeah. Some of that unpredictability that can frustrate you can also excite you, right?
Right. Well, you know, let's connect all of the dots, because this also connects back to talent for those who are in that industry, and how companies are deciding to hire. But you also got to look at the institutions that, you know, for, let's say, the last 100, 150 years have been preparing our workforce, right? A part of, you know, of what happens at a liberal arts college is that they prepare you to learn, and they give you the history and supposed to give you the depth of what have you. And when you put all of that together, it prepares you to go into industry, whether or not you have a trade, you know, skill per se or not. What's also happening at these institutions of higher learning, whether they get NIH grants or they get federal grants, and they get all other types. There's literally billions of dollars that goes into our higher ed institutions to do research on these very technologies without a lot of regulation, right? And without a lot of ethics and a lot of bias. I think of Dr. Timnit Gebru, who's a colleague in this Black tech ecosystem. She's one of the, if not, she's the leading AI and ethics technical lead. She's at Google, but she's a computer scientist. And when you talk to Timnit, she talks about how in these higher institutions or in these companies. They now call it corporate innovation. It used to be research and development, where they, without regulation, were coding and developing and creating things. And they come up with some of the most weirdest use cases, right? And those use cases may, culturally not be deemed appropriate to even demo or to talk about openly. But there's a lot of this stealth development that happens, and eventually, because of federal policies that started pushing through the SBA, the SBIR program, and through Commerce Department, they started pushing for the commercialization of government research and academic research. And now we see a lot of the innovation economy that comes out of these respective universities. And then some folks come along and they say, oh, I believe I could take that technology and turn it into a business, something that either makes money for a company or saves money for a company.
Same
right?
model as the national labs use.
Exactly. What happens in the national labs happens in these higher institutions. By the time major corporations say, well, we've got to stay up to date because these startups are coming for us and they're chopping off at our market share, or one of my competitors is going and it's only so many acquisitions I can make, then they start to look for the innovative technologies that aren't mainstream yet. They're not public companies. And so they go buy these companies up at various levels and they put them in their respective supply chains. And you're saying, okay, what does all this have to do with COVID-19 and where we are today in history? Well, as that COVID-19, this enemy we can't see landed, there was another, and I'm not going to call it an enemy at all, but there was something else that landed called the Fourth Industrial Revolution. And so shareholders and boards and C-suites of companies at all levels and all institutions are saying, from a liability perspective, if I have a robot in the factory, if I have 100 robots and I just need one human being to manage those robots, I don't have to pay them workman's comp. I don't have to pay them insurance. I don't have to pay payroll taxes on them. And so now we have this new workforce that enters. And then because the taxes may be lower because of whatever, it's a trickle, the only trickle down we've seen hadn't been worked out for most folks, Right. So if this trickles down from the large corporates through the research institutions to the small businesses, I was having this conversation with a minority-owned business the other day. They were like, man, it's terrible. We might lose this contract because, we clean these buildings. We've been making, good money for 10, 20, 30 years doing it this way. And now they want to bring these robots in to clean after work. And so my question was, well, when things were good, did you ever, do your own R&D and go invest and explore some of these newer technologies? You could have been on at the ground level, And so it's perspective in terms of how we look at this pandemic. Yes, you may be at home.
Rodney, back to your earlier statement about don't get so comfortable in your success that you cease to be hungry to know more.
Absolutely. So in that particular vein, you might be sheltering in place, and because of the privilege of work or your hard work, you may not be feeling it today. You might think this is just a long vacation. Balance is the key. Get your self-care, be healthy, but this is a perfect opportunity to add some new skills. Whether that's teaching yourself to code, or maybe learning a programming language, or how to build an app, or technical sales, growth marketing. These are some data analytics. These are the skills, like get a cybersecurity certificate, right? And so I'm giving y'all the plug. If you're a business, look at how you can get into those respective industries that are remote learning, right? Ed tech. You think about it, all of these industries that at one point were just getting slow traction went like that overnight.
Yes.
Right? Whether it's a startup with 2 people or a publicly traded company with 10,000 or 20,000 employees. And so you may be successful right now. And I know you can't make it to Saks and Neiman and all the other places. You get to save some money, maybe invest some of that money, prepare for the future. But if you are successful, can you use this period of time to graduate from success to what we call significance?
You know, I have a friend who lives in the UK, and I was communicating with him just this week, Rodney, and he was sharing how he has partnered with TikTok, and he is creating a new product that I'm going to actually have him talk with you about. And it's a commerce product. It's a digital commerce product. And it's amazing. I mean, it's just amazing what he's doing. And he was just sitting home, and he was using his own experience sitting home to think, how would I like to be served better, and created a new business. And his investments in that business were like one phone call, done. You know, he made so much sense, and he thought it through, and he didn't sit down and, you know, build a big business plan. He had a great idea that made a lot of sense, and it was a personal reference from his own use point. He had credibility in his relationships, and now he's fully invested and ready to launch in September. It's amazing. Wow. I mean, he's just, what you're saying is happening, and I'm hoping that our family, our listeners, are really digging into what you're saying, because you're leaning in on some rich stuff.
You know, to that point, I remember when LinkedIn was in beta, and I got the first invite to join LinkedIn. I had a social network at the time.
Wow.
Factor.
Wow, I didn't know that, Rodney. I didn't know that. I'm learning.
And when you get that invitation, LinkedIn used to be membership only. You had to get an invite from someone in the company or someone who had been designated as a super member to invite you. But the aesthetics of the product were not perfect. It doesn't look like the LinkedIn when you log on today and you're like, oh, the user design is engaging and it's full of content. You know, same thing with like Twitter and all of these different platforms. If you go back and look at like archive.org, it's a website you can go to, and you can look at websites, go all the way back to the inception of a website domain name. The first time Twitter launched, most of us would not have used it. Same thing with Instagram, you know, but there are always these early adopters, people who are willing to start using something early, and they know it's going to break. They're not going to complain, but provide constructive criticism to the company so they can fix it, doing that beta phase. You got a lot of people who live in beta, you know, their lives, their companies, they're constantly iterating and reiterating and thinking, you know, like you say, renewing. The thing about the word renew, when we talk about the renewing of the mind, the whole concept of renew is at one point it was new. And so that means it's a returning to a point in your mental psyche that maybe you weren't aware of, but through that renewal, you manifest something new in your situation and in your life.
And that means that you may have some white space, probably should have some white space that's occurring somewhere between where you are and where you go back to move forward.
You're absolutely right. And on that white space,
you talk about that in your book.
Yeah, absolutely. Now you're talking about Kingonomics, 12 innovative currencies to transforming your life and business, inspired by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. You know, author, you got to get that plug in there.
Please do. Please do. I love your writing. I love your writing.
Thank you. In Kingonomics, when we talk about those white spaces, if you've ever had the chance to come to Atlanta in the past, come to Morehouse, and you come to Kansas City, in our ecosystem lab, we have a lot of white space on the walls. The white space is for open ideation. What you write on the wall, it doesn't have to be perfect because it can be erased and rewritten. And so when we have these white spaces, that's
Rodney,
when
and you got to get it on the wall. A key thing for our listeners, you got to get it on the wall because life is happening so quickly and you may be pedaling fast or slow in it, but stuff is still happening. What you don't put on the wall, you may not recall.
Right, absolutely. You're a little Michael Jackson in there and it's all in there. So on those white spaces, you know, when it says write the vision, make it plain, put it on tables, so he that reads the vision runs with it. Mm-hmm. And usually it's not just you running with the vision, it's someone reads your vision and runs with your respective vision. That's how you build teams. One can put 1,000, two can put 10,000, three can put 100,000, four, 1 million, right? So in those white spaces is where you write your future. What you want to create, what can you become obsessive about solving, right? You develop that obsession for solving a problem. It might be in your personal life, in your family, in your health, in your wealth, in your career, on the job, in your business. When you become obsessive about solving it, you have the passion, but on those white spaces, you also got to understand how to think through the process. Ideation and design thinking is not just a buzzword. There's a proper process to ideating and design thinking. We teach these in our startup entrepreneurship boot camps. Is the ideation and the problem solving process, there's a methodology or a science to it by which the first iteration of something, you automatically know that that's not going to be the last iteration. And some people rush to get something done, and then they push it out there thinking that's going to be the final product. Now, a lot of people basically don't even push it out there because they want it to be perfect. And what we understand is that when we introduce new business models, when we introduce new products, new companies come online, new social networks, they put the product out there first, knowing that this is not the final product.
All the beta people.
Absolutely. And so on that, when you allow for this white space in your life and in your mind and physically in your house, if you have a small, you can even go buy the white imagination paint and they have it in different colors. You could take a small part or a wall and create your own ideation board, your own innovation board, and start getting those ideas out there and start going through the process of doing the research about the problem you want to solve and get it out. And so that's a part of, you know, achieving success in a pandemic and beyond is being able to constantly evolve and iterate yourself. And as the punches come, however they come, you keep navigating them and moving forward.
And folk can do this at home for themselves right now. Hey, Rodney, let's lean in a little bit for our audience as well and talk a little bit about these boot camps, because there are reasons why executives and companies need to know about them and what they offer to companies, as well as reasons why some of our entrepreneurially minded or workforce aimed audience need to know where the individual benefit is to them. Just talk about it a little bit. Nobody does it better than you. It's yours. Well, maybe Shanteria, but hey.
Absolutely. So about 7 years ago, and this was really birthed out of the startup tech community. So there's a community in America and really around the world where people do nothing but work on new ideas, new companies, new products. They work to turn them into startups, and they work to go get customers. Some work to go get venture capital, and a lot of them are built on software. And so these companies, these software companies, started to grow very, very fast and have the need to hire more software engineers, maybe not at the senior level, but at that entry to mid level. And so the startup community responded by creating basically reverse engineering everything that a entry-level to mid-level engineer would require and need to actually work inside of that company. And so they started basically doing these prototype courses where they do sprints, 12 weeks, and all you would do is learn one language, Java. back end, Python back end, or JavaScript front end. And the goal in a 12-week or 16-week period was to become competent in that particular language, but to also embrace the concepts of lifelong learning, where you learn one language today, but if your supervisor or team member says, hey, we need to build this out in another language stack, you take the weekend or the next couple of weeks and you teach yourself another language. So the coding boot camps enable an accelerated path to the requirements of being a software engineer at the entry to mid-level. And a lot of companies, it's becoming more of a trend that the companies are now partnering with boot camps like ours and some of our other partners as well. And they're saying, we want to reskill some of our existing employees. They're already working at the company, but we want to reskill them. Or we want to go and basically bring a boot camp in-house to invite new hires to come through the boot camp, and once they finish it. And so that whole corporate training around software engineering is becoming like a thing. That's number one. The boot camp industry has also been continuously growing, and now you have community colleges, HBCUs, other schools that are partnering with boot camps. We just put together a partnership between Morehouse College, Opportunity Hub, and Momentum Learning to create the first boot camp at an HBCU. Not just for the students, but maybe you are an alum of the Atlanta University Center. Maybe you have become unemployed or underemployed or are ready for a career change because of COVID-19. You can go reskill and take your other skills, combine them with these skills, and then take those back into the workforce. There are still millions of engineering, cybersecurity, health IT, analytics, quality assurance. There's so many different entry to mid-level roles that companies are still hiring for when they might be decreasing, their.
You're seeing that. We are seeing that richly. So, amen. Rodney, your knowledge, your passion, your humility, and your sharing, your gifting is so huge. Take us back a little bit before we finish this conversation. Take us back a little bit to how you grew up and how you got to be you. I mean, success, we see that. Tell us a little bit about your journey to success. What was life like for you the day you were born?
On the day I was born, well, I know it was cold and it was Christmas Day.
Y'all listening now. Y'all listening.
So I remember growing up with the love of my mother and my grandparents, my grandfather in particular, in Atlanta, Georgia. And I think there's something about growing up in Atlanta. I believe that we need more archetypes than stereotypes. And growing up in Atlanta, I wasn't alive when Dr. King was alive. I know a lot of people that knew him personally. But being able to see, and I'm talking personally and culturally, to see people who look like me, to see other Black people in positions of influence and leadership, from the mayor to the banker, to the pastor, to the lawyer, to the small business, everything in the part of Atlanta, Southwest Atlanta, that we were raised in, Southwest and Northwest, and going to Frederick Douglass High School, all of that had an early impact on my life. And, what's interesting is my parents allowed me to explore new things. I remember one Christmas, before Christmas, we used to flip through the Sears catalog and we circle everything we thought we wanted. And hopefully they would pick something. Well, that one year in middle school, and I was elementary school, 6th grade, they got me a computer. And that was my first compact computer back then, and that's when I started self-teaching myself to program and to code. But I also had another creative edge. My first instrument was the violin, so my parents fostered me. I think I just came home and said, I want to do it, and I think that in hindsight, they didn't do everything I wanted, but those type of things, when they said, I wanted to do that, they weren't saying, oh, you should play the violin. I came home and said, some people have their parents push and say, I think you should try out this instrument. But when I came home, they were open and amenable to that. And I think that made a deep impression as well. My next instrument was the piano, and I have four uncles, 3 still living, that were pastors of churches. And so church was a major part of my life. And when I started playing, I played by ear, and so I could play the church songs or what have you. And I remember one day, I just got into high school, and the pastor called me, my uncle called me into the office and said, that envelope is for you. And I was like, well, what did I do? He's like, oh, no, I want to thank you. We want to be a blessing to you. And we pay our musicians. We give them a stipend. Oh. And so here I am, wait a minute, starting to become entrepreneurial as well. And I missed a lot of high school football games because I would be at church playing on a Friday night or weekend. And not just because I could make money, I enjoyed it, but also knew that I could make money. And I think that's what unlocked that entrepreneurial spirit. But then when I started to learn history about my family and learn about my Uncle Ben on my grandfather's side of the family, who after emancipation of the Southern slaves became a Pullman porter and made his money and was able to convince landowners in Georgia to sell him thousands of acres of land. And so that was Uncle Ben. That was entrepreneurial. And so that passing that down, whether you believe it's genetically or through stories or what have you. But I'll say it was really, I had businesses through college, in New Orleans where I went to school, and then in Pennsylvania where I went to school. But I would say that, I don't know if you watched Super Friends coming along. That was one of the TV shows I had. And they had this group on there called the Wonder Twins, right? And so I thought I was a good entrepreneur just doing things with myself. But in 98, when Shantir and I got together, and one of the first things we were working on was a nonprofit to help youth. And we started there. We started doing concerts, and we started doing meetings. And I was working at this church. I was the administrator of a church in Atlanta. It's a mega church there. And one of the things, and I didn't know at first, and I'm taking the time to do this because you never know where things lead. I told the pastor when he asked me to what I consider the job of being his chief administrator, I said, yes, but only if you would bring internet. Somehow I read it and studied and knew that if he could bring internet, he brought the first T1 line down Campbellton Road in South Atlanta. When you talk about the politics of them agreeing, he used his influence, and he did it because I asked him. He was like, Sampson, what are you having me do again? We're having this T1 line installed in the church. It took almost a year. And they had to dig a line and lay the pipe. But what we didn't know was that we were also activating internet in the community. But because we had that high-speed internet in the church, we were able to start testing the streaming media.
So much in the community comes out of the church.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so that intersectionality, that's how streamingfaith.com was born, my first tech company. Mm-hmm. And we literally haven't looked back since in terms of starting companies. Some fail, some succeed, some were acquired. Then going through the journey of looking for what Napoleon Hill calls definitive purpose.
Yes.
Why were you created? Why were you born? Why did you survive? Why weren't you aborted? Why did you survive your abuse or your misuse or everything that happens just in the human experience? And you're still here and you made it. You still have the opportunity. Today, living is winning, right? And so if you approach that every day, living is winning, everything else is extra. It's lane gap, you know. And as a part of that, you know, I just kept pushing because I knew there was more. And I'll close with this segment per se is when you start to move at levels in business, society, class, however, economically, you start to see fewer women and fewer Black people, Latinx people. And something that I think that was created in me as a child, emphasized in me when I got married and started to build a family, is that I don't want to be an onlyist. It's great to be the first to do this and the first to do that. Some people rest there. And for me, being the only, you know, or one of the only successful entrepreneurs in Black tech wasn't enough. Because this country requires hundreds of thousands or millions of people to be involved in this fourth industrial revolution.
My mom and daddy always taught us, you can be the first, but make sure you're not the last.
Absolutely. And if you adopt that, you know, I think what's tied to success is the concept of succession. And I think if we learn from succession backwards, we understand that we put systems in place, and we're doing this inside of Opportunity Hub. We were able to accelerate faster because we had already been putting these systems in place, and we had been practicing doing live events. Just to bring this home to the original question.
Conversation,
yes. South by Southwest was canceled. Within a week, we stood up a virtual conference for 2 days and had over 1,100 people on it. You participated.
It was splendid.
We had a DJ.
We
might have been the first to have a DJ on a Zoom. Okay.
And let me tell you, he rocked me. Okay, he rocked me. Hey, look, Rodney, we got to do two things before I do this virtual hug off. One is we got to do what I call 4 for 4. Okay. I'm going to ask you 4 questions. You're going to give me 4 answers. Okay. Our family, our listeners are going to leave with 16 solid, good pointers from you. Okay. You ready?
Yeah.
And y'all, Rodney didn't know I was doing this with him because he hasn't heard me do this on a podcast before. Rodney, here we go. First of the 4. What are the 4 books that our family, our listeners, our audience need to make sure they read to assure they are gaining success information?
Absolutely. These are 3 of the books, so 3 books that were introduced to me by my wife, As a Man Thinketh.
Oh, yes. 1. Which I have rewritten, listeners, with permission.
Okay.
As a Person Thinketh. So if you want a copy of that book, you got to reach back to me. Oh, wow, Rodney. Yes. Didn't see that coming.
Wisest Man in Babylon.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. There's a wisest man and there's a richest man.
Richest man. Yeah. Yeah. The greatest salesperson in the world. Because no matter if you have your own business or work in a company, it's important for you to understand you're always selling. That's why it's important to know how your company makes money. How dare you go to a job and not know how your company makes money? You never know when you're going to be in the grocery store or wherever at a networking event and you got to sell your company, right? Or sell your business.
Or if we ever get back to it in the hallway.
Right.
Or in the chat room.
Exactly. On the TikTok, right? That's what we're trying to tell the young people. Kingonomics.
Okay. That's Rodney's book, y'all. You got to get on it. Okay. Yeah. We're rolling. You gave some really, really great books, Rodney. Second question. What are you listening to? What are the 4 things you're listening to right now? You talked about having that really cool DJ. What are the 4 things you're listening to? Some of our folks may not have been listening to what you're listening to, right?
Number 1, I'm listening to my wife. So listen to the person who you can trust unequivocally right now.
That's success, man. That's success. Right. Yes.
Number 2, I'm listening to that still voice inside. With everything that's going on, that's going around right now, quieting myself down, meditating as much as I can, just listening, right? And we talk professionally, we talk in business. And so we have to balance listening. So I'm listening to that voice. I listen to and I'm going to go technical right now. So I listen to what VentureBeat puts out. And VentureBeat is committed. It's a technology publication that is committed to reporting on what's going on in edge technology, future of work, fourth industrial revolution. Look up VentureBeat. And the fourth thing that I'm listening to these young people that are members of OHUB. I know y'all wanted 4 podcasts, I'm listening to the next generation we have in our house, and I'm listening to the chatter amongst, the thousands of college students. What are they saying? We're hearing their frustrations. They're telling us what they want to solve. They're telling us, what's next. We think we're telling them what's next, but if we listen to them, they're telling us how to teach them through TikTok in bite sizes. They're telling us how to inspire them through Instagram, right? Or how to educate them remotely through gaming. They're telling us because they're doing it. So I think if we can just look and peer, maybe give a few extra passes now, not so much chastising, but watch and listen respectively to what this next generation is doing.
Awesome. Okay, third question, Rodney.
Okay.
Many people talk about secrets to success, and many people don't believe, especially successful people, they need to keep things a secret. They are quite transparent as they succeed. And the higher up the chain they get, sometimes they get nicer and sometimes they get more open. Maybe it's just the authority that allows them to do it. We won't go into that. Here's the question for you. What are 4 characteristics of success that our family needs to adopt as they continue their journeys?
Absolutely. I'll borrow these from 4 of the currencies in Kingonomics.
Yes.
Kingonomics talks about these intangible currencies that manifest in our lives. The currency is anything that flows. Mm-hmm. Electricity is a current, right? It flows. Water
is one of your most precious currencies.
Oxygen is one as well. It flows through our body, right? Yes. Anything that flows. So 4 secrets, connectivity. We've heard people say your network is your net worth. Mm-hmm. It can be through connectivity if you're adding value to people. John Maxwell taught me extend heart before you extend a hand. You know, the greatest salespeople understand how to bring value to people before they ask, people for something. So connectivity is important. Reciprocity is a universal law. Practicing reciprocity, we see it in some companies through corporate social responsibility. Mm-hmm. We see it through philanthropic, but all of us in our own unique way can be philanthropic and can be socially responsive. Because if everyone is doing a little bit, right, we start to get the serendipity and density in that compound. I would also say transparency, which deals with not being perfect, but being transparent about when you make a mistake, when you fall short. And so being transparent is incredibly important. And then the 4th one is courage. I think having the courage to go where other people are hesitant in going is very, very key.
It's interesting you say that, Rodney, because my husband often said in his earlier life that the difference between people who achieve the success they say they wish and the people who don't are the people who rush to do things that the people who don't have the courage to.
Right. And so inside of this pandemic, inside of, whether it's COVID-19.1 to 25, whatever, this is an opportunity for you to exhibit some courage beyond your comfortability. It's easy to be courageous inside of your comfort zone, your network, your social strata. But when I see people that really accelerate, go to that next level or dimension, they, for a season, isolate themselves away from their comfortability. And I know when it seems like the vision is like getting too easy to manifest, that means it's time to work on something a little bit harder, right?
Yeah,
not abandon.
Most growth does not occur comfortably. It can hurt. They call it growing pains sometimes.
Right.
That's why we refer to growth as being exciting,
right,
revolutionary, giving forward. But you never hear people talk about growth and liken it to comfort.
Absolutely.
And let's go to number 4.
Yes.
Tell me 4 people who you consider the most, not most, let's do it this way. Who are the 4 people who you consider success role models for yourself?
Absolutely. Success role models for myself. I'm thinking there's this woman, she was the first Black woman to build $1 billion company from the ground up. Role model for scale, particularly in some of the work that we do. You know, when I start to look at in technology, some people might think of, you know, Mark Cuban or, you know, Mark Zuckerberg. They, you know, amazing founders and entrepreneurs. I think about Emmett McHenry, you know, and what Emmett did by applying to the federal government. He was the only company to apply to manage domain names on behalf of the United States government. That was a big deal. He was the only one, and he got the contract.
Yes.
And then this goes back,
don't get
right to the 80s. And so I think about, you know, Emmett McHenry, the founder of, you know, Network Solutions. You know, there's so many amazing people that I look to, you know, kind of studying and implementing. I'm trying to prioritize it. I'll even go to the faith community and I look at, and, you know, these may be men or women that you don't know, but I think about Dr. Brian Jefferson Mosley, who's been in ministry for 40 years. He was on the cutting edge of ministry in the 70s and the 80s. These are pioneers, you know, people who have done things that before they did it had never been done, you know, before. And then finally, I would think on the capital side, when I look at the industry we're in, when it comes to like venture capital and, you know, I have to think about how Warren Buffett invests, you know, as a builder capitalist, being a venture capitalist. I don't agree with, of course, everything that anybody, you know, does, but that ability to take very risky, significant bets on companies before anyone else does is not just a skill or a science, and it's definitely not guessing. There's a lot of due diligence that we put into making investments in startups that are very, very risky. But there's something
what other people didn't do, though, and now they're learning to do.
Yes.
He said he looks at the management and leadership teams.
Right.
And he bets on the teams. He's not betting on this or that property or that. He bets on the teams, and then he bets in lanes that he can have people bring intelligence to him that he can quickly factor. And absolutely. I think that's smart, don't you?
Yeah. Absolutely. He's betting on the horse, not the jockey, right?
Yes. Hey, listen, betting on the jockey. Yeah.
Jockey, not the horse. Yeah. Edit, jockey, horse.
Oh, wow, Rodney, you know, listen, I could just talk with you forever. I know Shanteria will not like that if I do. Come on, throw some love on us before you give me that virtual hug. Throw some love on us. Just tell us what's on your mind right now that you think we should take into post this listening, post this viewing, that can stay with us and help us along our success journey?
Absolutely. We're on a personal mission to help reskill America. I think it needs to be one of the major issues that our society is talking about, particularly with people who may be listening. You are unemployed, underemployed, feel like there's not a place for you. I think that as business leaders, as ecosystem builders, thought leaders, politicians, whoever's listening, the reskilling of America for a future that is here. It's really the now of work. It's not the future of work. It's the now of work. Because if we make the investment in reskilling America, this is how we'll keep our competitive edge. And this is just really for the rest of the world, because I know the world is also listening. This is how we maintain that creative, that innovative, that competitive edge. So if you are in any position of influence and you care about how people work and how people can learn, we hope this message resonates. All of the inspirational, aspirational components are. But from a technical perspective, we are working at Opportunity Hub and the OHUB Foundation to scale the ability to train. Of course, we're also focused on socially disadvantaged communities, the African American community, the Latinx community. We're focused on ensuring that those specific communities can also be skilled, so we can disrupt some of that terrible data that I don't even want to re-articulate in my closing words. But if we focus on that, number one, and then as a community, as a collective community of those who are listening, if we start to support one another in ideas, if there was, and we're building software to do this, so soon coming, but if there was a community where like-minded people could go and put forth their ideas and start collaborating and working and connecting, we really need that new connectivity as we move forward. We won't be able to exist in the type of isolation that we may have become accustomed to. We're going to need everyone on this planet, not just the humans, but we live in symbiosis with this planet and every creature on it. And so we've got to be sensitive to that. And then moving forward is to do things, finally, let's do them with grace. If they don't happen as fast as we'd like them to happen. Great things always have hiccups. Right before I began this podcast, I was on a team meeting working on a solution of a major gap in something we're working on, right? So as we navigate, we don't have to get angry. We don't have to curse. We don't have to be belligerent, but we can do it with grace. Grace is sufficient.
Grace is sufficient. Wow. Rodney, there is no secret why you and Shanteria are two of my favorite people. And certainly I know you've become one of the favorites of our family, our listening audience. Geez, thank you so much. Stay safe, stay well, stay growing, Rodney. And from my home to your heart, please stay with grace.
Thank you. Grace and peace.